The scorching California sun beat down mercilessly on Edwards Air Force Base as 23-year-old Jordan Blake stepped off the bus, her worn duffel bag slung over her shoulder and hope burning bright in her green eyes. She stood 5'4", with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing a faded t-shirt and patched jeans that told the story of her humble beginnings in rural Montana. In her pocket, she carried her father's old silver watch, a Vietnam veteran's timepiece that had survived enemy fire and decades of hard work on the family ranch. The watch face was scratched and worn, but it kept perfect time, just like her father had taught her that character mattered more than appearance. Jordan had dreamed of becoming a fighter pilot since she was 7 years old when her father told her stories of soaring through clouds and defending freedom itself. She'd worked 3 jobs through high school to save money for college, graduated summa cum laude with a degree in aeronautical engineering, and scored in the top 5% on every military aptitude test. But from the moment she entered the pilot training program at Edwards, Jordan faced a wall of contempt that felt insurmountable. The source of that contempt stood 6'2" with perfectly groomed dark hair, and the kind of chiseled features that belonged on military recruitment posters. Captain Marcus Sterling, 29 years old and the son of Brigadier General Richard Sterling, wore his privilege like armor. His pressed uniform was adorned with a gleaming Rolex that cost more than Jordan's family made in 6 months. Marcus had never known struggle, never understood what it meant to fight for every opportunity. He looked at Jordan with the kind of disdain reserved for those he considered beneath his social station. Her slight speech impediment, a stutter that only appeared when she was nervous or angry, became his favorite target for ridicule. Well, Marcus announced loudly during Jordan's first day of flight simulation training, his voice carrying across the hangar to ensure maximum humiliation. Look what the recruitment office dragged in. Can the poor girl even speak without stuttering over her words? His cruel mimicry sent ripples of laughter through the group of wealthy cadets who followed him like loyal servants. Among them was Victoria Cross, a socialite from Connecticut who treated military service like an adventure vacation and saw Jordan's struggles as entertainment for her social media following. Jordan felt her face burn with shame as the laughter echoed around her. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her father's watch through the fabric of her pocket, drawing strength from the connection to the man who had taught her that dignity came from within, not from the approval of others. "I'm here to fly, sir," Jordan managed to say, her voice steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her veins. Just like everyone else, Marcus's smile turned predatory. "We'll see about that, won't we? Flying isn't for everyone, especially those who can't even speak clearly under pressure." The other instructors watched this exchange with varying degrees of discomfort, but none intervened. Marcus's father's influence extended throughout the base, and challenging the Sterling family carried career consequences that few were willing to risk. As Jordan unpacked her belongings in the cramped barracks that night, she could hear Victoria's voice from the next room, live streaming to her followers about the pathetic charity case who thought she belonged among real pilots. The words cut deep, but Jordan had endured worse, growing up poor in a town where everyone knew everyone else's business. She pulled out her father's watch and wound it carefully, listening to the steady tick that had comforted her through countless difficult nights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was determined to prove that talent didn't need money to validate it. Outside her window, the sleek fighter jet sat silently on the tarmac under the desert stars, waiting for pilots, worthy of their power and speed. Jordan pressed her face against the cool glass. and made a silent promise to herself and to her father's memory. She would earn her place in the sky, no matter what it cost her. The watch ticked steadily in her palm, marking time until she could prove that sometimes the people who soar the highest are those who were once pushed down the lowest. The morning alarm at Edwards Air Force Base sounded at 500 hours, but Jordan had been awake for 30 minutes, reviewing flight manuals by the dim light of her desk lamp. She'd learned early that preparation was her only weapon against the systematic disadvantages she faced. Marcus Sterling strolled into the briefing room 20 minutes late, his uniform immaculate and his confidence unshakable. As the senior cadet, he had the authority to assign flight partners and aircraft for the day's training exercises. His announcement sent a chill through Jordan's chest. "Blake!" Marcus called out, his voice carrying that familiar note of disdain. "You'll be flying with Instructor Lieutenant Hayes in Aircraft 7. Try not to embarrass the program." Aircraft 7 was notorious among the cadets, an older F-16 trainer with temperamental hydraulics and a communication system that cut out at random intervals. It was the plane reserved for punishment details and cadets who were being pushed toward failure. Lieutenant David Hayes, a soft-spoken 45-year-old instructor with graying temples, gave Jordan an apologetic look as they walked toward the problematic aircraft. "Don't let Sterling get in your head," he said quietly. "I've seen your test scores. You belong here as much as anyone." The flight itself went better than Jordan had dared to hope. Despite the aircraft's mechanical issues, she adapted quickly to its quirks, compensating for the hydraulic delays and maintaining radio contact even when the communication system crackled with static. Her landings were textbook perfect, and her aerial maneuvers showed an intuitive understanding of aerodynamics that impressed even Hayes. But when they returned to the debriefing room, Marcus had prepared his trap. According to the flight data recorder, Marcus announced to the assembled group of cadets and instructors, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being believed without question. Blake's aircraft experienced multiple system warnings during the flight. Unusual stress on the airframe, irregular fuel consumption, and concerning radio irregularities. Jordan felt her stomach drop. She knew the flight had gone well, but Marcus was presenting data that painted a picture of dangerous incompetence. The other cadets exchanged glances, and she could see doubt creeping into their expressions. "So that's not accurate," Jordan said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "The aircraft performed within normal parameters. Lieutenant Hayes can confirm. Lieutenant Hayes wasn't monitoring the technical readouts," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "And I'm afraid the data doesn't lie. Perhaps you're not ready for this level of training." The room fell silent. Jordan looked around at faces that showed varying degrees of sympathy, confusion, and cruel satisfaction. Victoria Cross was already pulling out her phone, no doubt preparing to document Jordan's humiliation for her social media audience. "I'd like to see that flight data myself," Jordan said, her slight stutter beginning to emerge as stress tightened her throat. "I have the right to review any records that affect my standing in the program." Marcus's smile was cold and calculating. "Of course you do. Unfortunately, there seems to be a technical glitch with the data storage system. The records appear to have been corrupted during download. These things happen with older aircraft. The lie was so smooth, so perfectly delivered, that Jordan almost admired its audacity, even as it destroyed her credibility. She understood now that she wasn't just fighting against personal prejudice. She was up against someone willing to falsify official records to eliminate her from the program. "Lieutenant," Hayes cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Captain Sterling, I observed the flight directly, and Cadet Blake's performance was actually quite impressive, given the aircraft's known issues." "Thank you, Lieutenant." Marcus cut him off with the kind of dismissive tone that reminded everyone in the room of the difference between a captain and a lieutenant. I'm sure your observations are noted, but the technical data speaks for itself. Jordan gripped her father's watch through her flight suit pocket, feeling the familiar weight that had anchored her through every previous crisis in her life. She wanted to scream, to demand justice, to force someone to acknowledge the truth. But she was learning that truth and justice weren't always the same thing, especially when power and privilege were involved. I understand, sir, Jordan said finally, her voice clear despite the rage building in her chest. I'll work harder to meet the program's standards. Marcus's satisfied smile told her everything she needed to know about what lay ahead. This wasn't just about one corrupted flight record. It was about a systematic campaign to destroy her dreams before she could prove herself worthy of them. As the briefing broke up, Lieutenant Hayes lingered behind. Jordan, he said quietly, watch yourself around Sterling. He's got resources and connections that most of us can't match. Document everything, trust no one completely, and remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to quit. That night, Jordan sat in her barracks room writing detailed notes about the day's events in a notebook she kept hidden beneath her mattress. She documented Marcus's behavior, the suspicious flight data corruption, and Lieutenant Hayes's warnings. If this was going to be a war of attrition, she intended to be prepared for whatever came next. Outside her window, the fighter jet sat silently under the desert stars, still waiting for pilots worthy of their power. Jordan wound her father's watch and listened to its steady tick, drawing strength from the knowledge that some battles were worth fighting, even when the odds seemed impossible. The pressure began to build systematically over the following weeks, like a noose tightening slowly around Jordan's future. Marcus Sterling's campaign against her evolved from overt humiliation to something more subtle and dangerous, a carefully orchestrated series of accidents and misunderstandings that consistently placed her at a disadvantage. Her flight assignments became increasingly difficult and dangerous. While other cadets received standard training exercises in optimal weather conditions, Jordan found herself scheduled for night flights during thunderstorms, emergency landing procedures in aircraft with genuine mechanical problems, and formation, flying with pilots who had been briefed to make her look incompetent. The breaking point came during a routine weapons systems training exercise. Jordan had been assigned to work with Cadet Rachel Martinez, a quiet and competent pilot from Texas who had initially seemed immune to Marcus's influence. But as they prepared for a simulated air-to-ground attack mission, Rachel's demeanor shifted dramatically. Look, Jordan, Rachel said uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact as they conducted their pre-flight checks. I've been thinking about requesting a different partner for this exercise. Jordan felt her heart sink. Rachel was one of the few cadets who had treated her fairly, and losing that alliance would leave her completely isolated in the program. Did I do something wrong? Jordan asked, genuinely confused. Rachel shifted nervously, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Captain Sterling pulled me aside yesterday. He said there have been concerns about your performance, safety violations that haven't been officially documented yet. He suggested that flying with you might negatively impact my own evaluation scores. The words hit Jordan like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't just targeting her directly anymore, he was poisoning her relationships with other cadets, ensuring that she would have no allies or supporters when the final confrontation came. Rachel, you know that's not true, Jordan said desperately. You've flown with me. You know I'm competent. I know, Rachel said miserably, but I can't risk my career on someone else's problems. I'm sorry, Jordan. I really am. As Rachel walked away to find Marcus and request the partner change, Jordan stood alone beside the F-16 trainer, feeling more isolated than she had since arriving at Edwards. The other cadets gave her a wide berth, as if her supposed incompetence might be contagious, but she wasn't completely alone. Lieutenant Hayes approached her with a concerned expression, carrying a clipboard and wearing the kind of carefully neutral expression that military personnel adopted when they were about to deliver bad news. "Jordan, we need to talk," he said, quietly. "There's been another complaint filed against you." They walked to a quiet corner of the hangar, away from the curious ears of other cadets and instructors. Hayes looked genuinely troubled as he reviewed the papers on his clipboard. "According to this report, you were observed in the restricted maintenance area last Tuesday night around 2300 hours. Unauthorized access to that area is a serious violation that could result in immediate dismissal from the program." Jordan felt the blood drain from her face. Tuesday night she had been in her barracks room, writing in her hidden notebook and calling her mother in Montana to assure her that everything was going well. She had witnesses. At least 3 other cadets had seen her in the common area until well past midnight. "Sir, I was never in the maintenance area. I can prove where I was that entire evening." Hayes nodded sympathetically. "I believe you, Jordan, but the person who filed this report is Captain Sterling, and he claims to have photographic evidence of your presence in the restricted area." The trap was closing around her with mechanical precision. Marcus wasn't just making accusations now, he was manufacturing evidence to support his lies. Jordan realized that she was fighting against resources and connections that she couldn't match through conventional means. "What happens now?" she asked, surprised by how calm her own voice sounded. "There will be a formal hearing next week. You'll have the opportunity to present your defense, call witnesses, and challenge any evidence presented against you." "But Jordan," Hayes paused, clearly struggling with what he was about to say. "Sterling's father is Brigadier General Richard Sterling. The hearing board will include several officers who owe their current positions to General Sterling's influence. The deck is stacked against you in ways that have nothing to do with truth or justice." That evening, Jordan sat in her barracks room, staring at her father's watch, wondering if she was fighting a battle that couldn't be won. The steady tick of the timepiece reminded her of her father's stories about Vietnam, about facing impossible odds and finding ways to survive through determination and cleverness rather than superior firepower. She pulled out her notebook and began documenting everything Hayes had told her about the hearing process, the influence networks within the base command structure, and the specific accusations that Marcus was preparing to present. If she was going down, she intended to go down fighting. A soft knock on her door interrupted her planning. She opened it to find Alex Rivera, a fellow cadet she barely knew, standing in the hallway with a nervous expression. "Can I come in?" Alex asked quietly. "I think we need to talk about Marcus Sterling." Alex, 22 years old with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes, had been watching the systematic persecution of Jordan with growing anger. Alex's own father had been drummed out of the Air Force years earlier by the same network of privileged officers who now protected Marcus, and the pattern was sickeningly familiar. "I know what he's doing to you," Alex said once Jordan had closed the door behind them. "And I think I know how to prove it." For the first time in weeks, Jordan felt a spark of hope. She wasn't completely alone in this fight after all. As Alex began explaining what they had observed and documented about Marcus's campaign, Jordan wound her father's watch and listened to its steady tick, counting down the hours until she could prove that sometimes the ones pushed down the hardest do indeed end up soaring the highest. The formal hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in the base's main conference room, a sterile space dominated by an American flag and official portraits of military leaders who had never known what it meant to fight for acceptance in their own chosen profession. Jordan sat at a small table facing 7 senior officers, 4 of whom had direct social or professional connections to the Sterling family. Marcus Sterling stood at attention beside a presentation screen, his dress uniform immaculate, and his confidence absolute. The evidence he had assembled was impressive in its scope and damning in its implications. Doctored security footage showing Jordan entering the restricted maintenance area, financial records suggesting she had been gambling with money she couldn't afford to lose, and witness statements from cadets who claimed she had made inappropriate comments about military leadership. Every piece of evidence was a lie, but the lies were so sophisticated and well coordinated that Jordan understood she was facing an enemy with resources far beyond anything she could match. The evidence speaks for itself, Marcus concluded his presentation, with the kind of moral authority that came naturally to those who had never been challenged. Cadet Blake represents exactly the kind of security risk that our training programs are designed to identify and eliminate. When Jordan was given the opportunity to defend herself, she stood slowly, feeling the weight of her father's watch in her pocket and drawing strength from the knowledge that some battles were worth fighting, regardless of their outcome. "I swear before the honor of my father," she began, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds against her. "I swear before this watch that belonged to him, I never accessed any restricted areas, never gambled with anyone's money, and never made disrespectful comments about military leadership." She placed the silver watch on the hearing table, where it caught the harsh fluorescent lighting and seemed to glow with its own internal warmth. "But I understand that in this world, privilege and power always seem to triumph over truth. Captain Sterling has used his father's influence and his family's resources to wage a systematic campaign of persecution against me from the moment I arrived at Edwards. He has falsified records, manufactured evidence, and poisoned my relationships with other cadets because he cannot tolerate the idea that someone from my background might be as good a pilot as he thinks he is." The room fell silent. Several of the hearing officers shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the truth in Jordan's words, even as they prepared to ignore it for political reasons. Marcus's face flushed with anger at being directly challenged in front of his father's allies. "These are desperate accusations from someone facing the consequences of her own poor choices," he said coldly. "Cadet Blake has shown a pattern of blaming others for her failures since arriving at this base. The verdict was swift and merciless: immediate dismissal from the pilot training program, financial liability for alleged damages to base property, and a permanent mark on her military record that would prevent her from ever serving as a pilot in any branch of the armed forces." As Jordan packed her belongings that afternoon, the other cadets watched from their dormitory windows. Some laughed and pointed, others recorded her departure for social media content, but most simply avoided eye contact with the reminder of how quickly dreams could be destroyed by those with sufficient power and malice. Only Alex Rivera had the courage to walk alongside Jordan to the base gates, carrying her bag and offering silent solidarity in the face of institutional injustice. "This isn't over," Alex whispered as they embraced goodbye. "I'm going to keep digging until I find proof of what Marcus did to you, and when I do, the whole world is going to know the truth." Jordan nodded, but her heart was broken in ways that seemed irreparable. As the bus pulled away from Edwards Air Force Base, she watched the fighter jets on the tarmac disappear behind a cloud of desert dust, feeling like she was leaving behind the only dream that had ever truly mattered to her. But instead of returning home to Montana and the inevitable questions from her mother Sarah, Jordan made an impulsive decision that would change the trajectory of her entire life. She had heard about employment opportunities with civilian contractors operating in the mysterious regions around Nevada, where private companies worked on classified projects that officially didn't exist. The decision felt like accepting defeat, but it would prove to be the first step toward a comeback that Marcus Sterling could never have imagined in his worst nightmares. 6 months after her exile from Edwards Air Force Base, Jordan Blake found herself in the Nevada desert working for Apex Aviation Solutions, a civilian contractor that provided reconnaissance services for various government agencies. The work was challenging and well paid, but it felt like a consolation prize compared to the fighter pilot career that had been stolen from her. She lived in a small apartment in a town that barely qualified for the name, spending her days monitoring drone flights over vast stretches of empty desert and her nights studying advanced aeronautical engineering texts that she ordered online. The technical knowledge she was gaining was impressive, but it felt like preparing for a race she would never be allowed to run. Everything changed on a Tuesday evening when Jordan was working late in the company's communication center, monitoring routine surveillance flights, and her father's watch began emitting a faint radio signal. At first, she thought exhaustion was playing tricks on her mind. She had been working 16-hour days, trying to lose herself in technical specifications and flight patterns, eating nothing but convenience store sandwiches and instant coffee. The idea that her father's watch was producing radio signals seemed like the kind of delusion that came from physical and emotional depletion. But then the static resolved into words, and the voice that emerged was so clear and authoritative that Jordan couldn't dismiss it as imagination. "The coordinates on that watch," the voice said, startling Jordan so completely that she nearly dropped the precious timepiece. "They lead somewhere important, if you're brave enough to follow them." Jordan found herself responding before conscious thought could intervene. "Who are you?" The answer that came back would haunt and inspire her for the rest of her life. Someone who knows what it's like to have dreams stolen by people who mistake privilege for talent. Over the course of several cryptic radio conversations, the voice, who identified himself only as Phantom, revealed that he had been watching Jordan's progress at Edwards, monitoring her persecution by Marcus Sterling, and waiting for the right moment to make contact. Phantom spoke with the kind of knowledge about military aviation that could only come from years of experience at the highest levels, referencing aircraft specifications and flight procedures that weren't available in public databases. More intriguingly, he seemed to know details about Jordan's family history that even she wasn't fully aware of. "Your father's watch contains coordinates that were encoded during his service in Vietnam," Phantom explained during one of their late-night conversations. "He was part of a classified program that most people still don't know existed. The coordinates lead to a place where his legacy is waiting for you." Following the coordinates led Jordan to an abandoned ranch 20 miles outside of town, where the desert landscape gave way to a series of unremarkable buildings that looked like any other failed agricultural operation. But beneath the surface, accessible through hidden entrances concealed by decades of careful camouflage, lay one of the most sophisticated flight training facilities ever constructed. The underground complex housed equipment that made Edwards A simulators look like children's toys, full-motion flight simulators capable of replicating the experience of flying the most advanced aircraft in the American military arsenal, computer systems that could model weather conditions and combat scenarios with perfect accuracy, and technical libraries containing information about aircraft that officially didn't exist. "Welcome to the place where real pilots are made," Phantom's voice crackled through the facility's intercom system as Jordan stood in the main hangar, staring at technology that seemed decades ahead of anything she had seen at Edwards. "For two, weeks, Jordan trained in this hidden facility under Phantom's remote supervision, learning to fly aircraft that she had only seen in classified photographs. Her mysterious instructor remained invisible, communicating only through radio and computer interfaces, but his knowledge was encyclopedic, and his teaching methods were more effective than anything she had experienced in formal military training. He pushed her to develop skills that went beyond mere technical proficiency, encouraging her to trust her instincts and develop the kind of intuitive connection with aircraft that separated great pilots from merely competent ones. The crown jewel of Phantom's hidden training facility was a flight simulator, unlike anything Jordan had ever encountered, a perfect replica of the cockpit and control systems of an aircraft so classified that its very existence was known to fewer than a dozen people in the entire world. "What you learn here," Phantom's voice explained as Jordan strapped herself into the simulator for the first time, "will determine whether you're ready for the opportunity that's coming. Marcus Sterling destroyed your conventional military career, but he may have inadvertently set you on a path towards something he could never achieve himself." As Jordan began learning to interface with the simulator's advanced artificial intelligence systems, she felt her father's watch grow warm against her chest. The timepiece seemed to respond to her emotional state and the intensity of her training, as if her father's spirit was somehow connected to this mysterious place where impossible dreams could still come true. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, at Edwards Air Force Base, Alex Rivera was conducting their own investigation into Marcus Sterling's systematic persecution campaign. Using advanced computer forensics tools available to civilian contractors, Alex had begun analyzing the digital evidence that had destroyed Jordan's military career. What Alex discovered would eventually provide the ammunition needed to bring down the Sterling family's network of corruption, but for now, it remained a carefully guarded secret as Alex built an airtight case that would expose the truth about Edwards Air Force Base's Golden Boy. The war for Jordan's redemption was about to begin in earnest, fought with weapons that Marcus Sterling didn't even know existed. The breakthrough came during Jordan's third week of training in Phantom's underground facility. She had just completed a flawless simulation of a classified mission profile when the facility's communication system crackled to life with a new voice, one that carried the unmistakable authority of high military command. "Jordan Blake, this is General Patricia Morrison. We need to talk." General Morrison, 54 years old, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, had been monitoring Jordan's progress through channels that even Phantom didn't fully understand. As the commanding officer responsible for the most classified aircraft development programs in the United States Air Force, she had access to intelligence networks that could track talented individuals long before they appeared on official radar. The conversation that followed would have been surreal under any circumstances, but conducting it through radio while sitting in the cockpit of a simulator for an aircraft that officially didn't exist elevated it to the realm of the extraordinary. "Ms. Blake," General Morrison's voice explained through the simulator's communication system, "what Captain Sterling did to you at Edwards was not just personal persecution, it was a systematic abuse of military justice that reflects problems we've been tracking throughout the entire pilot training program." Morrison revealed that Jordan's case was part of a larger investigation into corruption and abuse within the military aviation training system. Several other promising candidates had been eliminated from programs through similar campaigns of manufactured evidence and false accusations, always targeting individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds who threatened the established social hierarchy. "We've been building a case against the Sterling network for 2 years, Morrison continued. "What we needed was someone with the skills and character to demonstrate what we've lost through this systematic discrimination. Your training results here have been extraordinary, far beyond what we achieved with traditionally trained pilots." The opportunity Morrison presented was both simple and terrifying. Jordan would participate in a public flight demonstration at the upcoming Air Force Academy graduation ceremony, flying an aircraft so advanced that its public revelation would revolutionize understanding of American military capabilities. If she succeeded, her abilities would be undeniable, and her story would expose the corruption that had nearly ended her career. If she failed, or if she chose not to accept the challenge, Marcus Sterling's lies would stand as the final word on her capabilities. Jordan's response came without hesitation. "General, I don't need anyone to believe in me anymore, but when I'm done flying, they won't be able to forget me." Meanwhile, at Edwards Air Force Base, Alex Rivera had finally assembled the evidence needed to expose Marcus Sterling's campaign of persecution. Using advanced digital forensics techniques, Alex had uncovered the financial transactions that funded the creation of fake evidence, traced the network of bribed technicians who had participated in the frame-up, and identified the artificial intelligence software used to create the doctored security footage. More importantly, Alex had discovered that Marcus's persecution of Jordan was part of a larger pattern of systematic discrimination that had eliminated dozens of qualified candidates from military aviation programs over the past 5 years. The evidence was overwhelming, but Alex needed a platform to present it that couldn't be suppressed by the Sterling family's influence. The solution came in the form of Emma Rodriguez, an investigative journalist who specialized in exposing military corruption and had been searching for evidence of the systematic problems that Alex had uncovered. Rodriguez's initial investigation confirmed Alex's findings and revealed additional victims of the Sterling network's abuse of power. Her preliminary reports began appearing in major news outlets just as preparations for the Air Force Academy graduation ceremony were reaching their final stages. The timing was perfect. Marcus Sterling would be leading the aerial demonstration team for the graduation ceremony, confident in his position and unaware that his entire world was about to collapse around him. Jordan's mysterious training in the Nevada desert was complete, and she was ready to prove her abilities in front of 15,000 spectators, including members of Congress, foreign military attachés, and news crews from around the world who would witness either her triumph or her final humiliation. General, Morrison's final briefing was conducted through the secure communication system at Phantom's facility, her voice carrying the weight of decisions that could affect national security and international relations. "Jordan, what you'll be flying tomorrow is the X-47 Shadowhawk, the most advanced stealth aircraft ever constructed. Your demonstration will not only vindicate your abilities, it will establish American air superiority for the next generation. No pressure." As Jordan prepared for the most important flight of her life, Marcus Sterling was making final preparations for what he believed would be his greatest triumph, leading the Air Force Academy's aerial demonstration team in front of the largest and most prestigious audience of his career. He had no idea that the woman he had tried to destroy was about to demonstrate capabilities that would make his own flying look like amateur hour, using an aircraft so advanced that his security clearance wouldn't even allow him to know of its existence. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just Jordan's future, but the future of military aviation itself. The morning of the Air Force Academy graduation ceremony dawned clear and perfect over Colorado Springs, with unlimited visibility and calm winds that would showcase aerial demonstrations to maximum effect. 15,000 spectators filled the parade field grandstand, including congressional representatives, foreign military officials, and news crews from around the world. Among the VIP guests sat Sarah Blake, Jordan's mother, wearing her bestie dress and experiencing her first visit to a military installation. She had no idea that her daughter would soon be performing in front of this massive audience. As far as Sarah knew, Jordan was still working for a civilian contractor in Nevada. Marcus Sterling stood with his aerial demonstration team on the flight line, resplendent in his dress blue uniform with Major's oak leaves gleaming on his shoulders. He had been promoted based on his supposed success in identifying security risks within the pilot training program, and today's demonstration would cement his reputation as one of the Air Force's rising stars. The ceremony began with traditional military pomp, speeches from senior officials, presentation of awards to graduating cadets, and recognition of distinguished alumni who had served their country with honor. Marcus's demonstration team performed flawlessly, executing precision formation, flying that drew appreciative applause from the crowd. But the audience's attention shifted dramatically when a sound unlike any conventional aircraft began to fill the Colorado sky. The X-47 Shadowhawk that emerged from the morning clouds seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, its angular stealth design creating an almost supernatural presence that made every other aircraft look primitive by comparison. Jordan sat in the cockpit of the most advanced aircraft ever built, wearing a flight suit that bore no rank insignia or name tags. Her identity remained classified even at this moment of public demonstration, but her father's watch rested securely in the chest pocket of her flight suit, its familiar weight providing comfort and connection to the man who had taught her that true strength came from within. The demonstration that followed would be discussed and analyzed by aviation experts for decades to come. Jordan began with conventional maneuvers that showcased the Shadowhawk's impossible speed and agility, but she was building towards something that would redefine everyone's understanding of what was possible in military aviation. Flying at just 200 feet above the parade field, Jordan guided the aircraft through a complex series of turns and climbs that painted a specific pattern on radar displays throughout the region. The maneuver required precision that exceeded the aircraft's theoretical capabilities, but Jordan's intuitive connection to the Shadowhawk systems allowed her to achieve performance levels that amazed even the engineers who had designed the plane. Marcus Sterling watched from the ground with growing horror as he recognized the flight techniques being demonstrated above him. The impossible aerial maneuvers, the supernatural precision, the way the aircraft seemed to respond to the pilot's thoughts rather than control inputs. He had seen these capabilities before during Jordan's training flights at Edwards, before he had destroyed her career with lies and manufactured evidence. "That's Jordan Blake," he gasped, his face pale, with the realization that the woman he had tried to eliminate had not only survived, but had gained access to technology and opportunities that he could never hope to achieve. The climax of Jordan's demonstration was a vertical climb that took her from 200 feet to 20,000 feet in less than 30 seconds, creating a sonic boom that rolled across the parade field like thunder from a clear sky. 15,000 people leapt to their feet in spontaneous applause that continued for nearly 5 minutes, while news cameras captured images that would be broadcast around the world as evidence of American technological superiority. The landing that concluded Jordan's demonstration was performed with surgical precision, the Shadowhawk touching down on the Academy's main runway as gently as if it were settling onto a cloud. As Jordan shut down the aircraft systems and opened the cockpit canopy, she looked across the flight line to where Marcus Sterling stood with his demonstration team, his world crashing down around him as he finally understood the magnitude of what he had tried to destroy. General Morrison's presentation of the Distinguished Flying Cross to Jordan took place in front of the assembled crowd, television cameras, and representatives of allied nations who would carry news of American aviation capabilities back to their home countries. "Lieutenant Jordan Blake," Morrison announced, using Jordan's new rank for the first time in public, has demonstrated not only exceptional skill as a pilot, but the kind of character and determination that represents the finest traditions of American military aviation. Jordan accepted the medal with quiet dignity, but her response to the assembled crowd carried the power of someone who had overcome systematic persecution to achieve something extraordinary. 2 years ago, I was told that people like me would never belong in the sky, Jordan said, her voice clear and strong over the ceremony's public address system. Today, I want everyone to understand that the sky belongs to anyone brave enough to claim it, regardless of where they come from or who tries to stop them. She held up her father's watch, its silver surface gleaming in the Colorado sunshine, and 15,000 people erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Air Force Academy. In the crowd, Sarah Blake wept with pride, as she finally understood what her daughter had been fighting for all these years, while news crews captured images that would inspire a generation of young people who had been told they weren't good enough to pursue their dreams. Marcus Sterling stood frozen in place, watching his carefully constructed world collapse as reporters began asking questions about his role in Jordan's original dismissal from Edwards Air Force Base. The investigation that Alex Rivera and Emma Rodriguez had been building was about to go public, and there would be no hiding from the consequences of his systematic abuse of power. The woman he had tried to destroy had not only survived, she had transcended everything he had ever accomplished, proving that talent and determination would always triumph over privilege and corruption when given the opportunity to soar. 6 months after Jordan's triumphant demonstration at the Air Force Academy, the consequences of her revenge continued to ripple through the military aviation community like shockwaves from a supersonic aircraft breaking the sound barrier. Marcus Sterling sat in a grey government office in Anchorage, Alaska, processing supply requisitions for weather monitoring equipment at the most remote military installation in North America. His major's oak leaves had been stripped away during the court-martial that followed the investigation into his systematic persecution campaign, and he now held the rank of second lieutenant, a demotion that reflected both his crimes and his complete unsuitability for leadership positions. The court-martial had been swift and merciless. Alex Rivera's digital forensics evidence, combined with Emma Rodriguez's investigative journalism and testimony from the technicians who had been bribed to manufacture false evidence, created an overwhelming case that even the Sterling family's influence couldn't suppress. Marcus's father, Brigadier General Richard Sterling, had been forced into early retirement after the investigation revealed his complicity in covering up his son's crimes and his role in the systematic discrimination that had eliminated dozens of qualified candidates from military aviation programs. The financial network that had enabled Marcus's persecution campaign was dismantled, and several other officers who had participated in the discrimination were reassigned to positions where they could no longer abuse their authority. But perhaps the most satisfying justice came in the form of Marcus's new daily reality. 8 hours a day in a windowless office, reviewing requests for toilet paper and snow removal equipment, completely cut off from the aircraft and flying opportunities that had once defined his identity. Jordan, meanwhile, had become the lead test pilot for the most classified aviation programs in American military history. Her identity remained officially secret, but her influence grew with each successful mission she flew. The underground training facility in Nevada was expanded and transformed into an official military installation, becoming the premier location for developing pilots with exceptional abilities. The facility attracted candidates from around the world, individuals who had been overlooked or rejected by traditional programs, but possessed the rare combination of technical skill and intuitive connection that modern warfare demanded. Jordan personally oversaw the selection and training of these pilots, ensuring that talent would always be recognized regardless of background or social connections. 1 year after her demonstration, Jordan established the David Hayes Memorial Scholarship Fund, named after the instructor who had tried to protect her at Edwards and had later revealed himself to be the mysterious phantom who had guided her training in the Nevada facility. Colonel Hayes, whose official retirement had been carefully orchestrated to protect his work on classified aircraft programs, continued to develop new training methods that identified and cultivated unconventional talents like Jordan's. His legacy lived on through the dozens of pilots who learned to fly aircraft that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. The scholarship program specifically targeted individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds who had demonstrated resilience in the face of systematic discrimination, ensuring that the next generation of aviators would be selected based on ability rather than privilege. Alex Rivera became the chief technical specialist for the advanced aircraft programs, their expertise in electronic systems proving invaluable for maintaining the cutting-edge technology that was beginning to replace conventional fighters throughout the Air Force fleet. Their work developing new pilot-machine interface systems helped create training protocols that could identify and develop abilities like Jordan's. Emma Rodriguez's investigative series on corruption and privilege in military institutions won numerous journalism awards and led to congressional hearings that resulted in significant changes to military justice procedures. Her work exposed similar patterns of abuse in other military installations, leading to the prosecution of dozens of officers who had used their positions to persecute qualified personnel. Rodriguez established a foundation dedicated to supporting whistleblowers and individuals who had been victimized by institutional corruption, providing legal assistance and media support for those brave enough to speak truth to power. Commander Sarah Martinez, the officer who had overseen Jordan's final evaluation in Colorado, was promoted to colonel and placed in charge of a new pilot selection program that prioritized character and adaptability over traditional metrics, revolutionizing how the Air Force identified and trained its most elite aviators. The personal cost of Jordan's journey had been significant, but the rewards extended far beyond her individual success. The isolation and persecution she had experienced at Edwards left emotional scars that required years of healing, but she had transformed that pain into a mission to ensure that others would not face the same systematic discrimination. She maintained a close relationship with her mother, Sarah, who had become something of a celebrity in their small Montana hometown. As the mother of America's most classified pilot, Sarah Blake established a support group for military families whose children served in highly classified positions, helping them cope with the stress of not knowing where their loved ones were or what dangerous missions they might be undertaking. The silver watch that had guided Jordan through her darkest moments now rested in a place of honor at the Air Force Academy Museum, accompanied by a plaque that read, "From those who had their dreams stolen to those who refused to let them stay buried." Visitors to the museum often reported feeling an unusual sense of inspiration when they approached the display case, and many left comments describing how Jordan's story had motivated them to pursue their own dreams despite the obstacles placed in their path. But the real legacy of Jordan Blake's story lived on in the hearts and minds of everyone who refused to let other people's limitations define their own possibilities. Her demonstration at the Air Force Academy had been broadcast around the world, and the footage of her impossible aerial maneuvers became a powerful symbol of what could be achieved when talent was given the opportunity to flourish. The international impact was equally significant. Foreign military observers struggled to understand how the United States had developed such advanced aircraft, and more importantly, how they had identified and trained pilots capable of achieving such extraordinary performance. Several Allied nations requested access to Jordan's training methods, leading to the establishment of international pilot exchange programs. Jordan continued to fly the most classified missions in American military aviation, her identity remaining Secret, but her influence growing with each successful operation. She became the template for a new generation of pilots who combined technical excellence with the kind of character that could only be forged through adversity. The electromagnetic phenomena that had made the Nevada desert a place of mystery became valuable training tools, creating natural conditions that prepared pilots for the electronic warfare environments they would face in real combat situations. Jordan's father's watch had become the inspiration for developing new navigation systems that could function in environments where conventional electronics failed. Years later, as Jordan stood in the cockpit of an aircraft so advanced that its very existence redefined the possible, she thought about the journey that had brought her from a small ranch in Montana to the cutting edge of human achievement. The stutter that Marcus Sterling had mocked had disappeared completely, replaced by the clear, confident voice of someone who had proven that dreams couldn't be destroyed by those who lacked the courage to pursue their own. The sound of her engines echoed across the Nevada desert, where test flights continued to push the boundaries of what aircraft could achieve and what pilots could accomplish when they refused to accept other people's definitions of their limitations. Marcus Sterling, meanwhile, continued his exile in Alaska, processing paperwork and wondering how his life had gone so wrong. On clear days, when military aircraft passed overhead on training missions, he would look up at the sky he had once considered his domain and remember the woman whose dreams he had tried to destroy. He never learned the full extent of what Jordan had accomplished after leaving Edwards Air Force Base, but sometimes, late at night, when the Alaskan wind howled around his lonely quarters, he would wonder if the impossible aircraft he occasionally saw in classified briefings might be flown by the same pilot he had once dismissed as unworthy of the sky. The story of Jordan Blake became required reading at military academies around the world, a reminder that the greatest achievements often come from those who have been underestimated by people who mistake privilege for ability. Her father's watch continued to tick in its museum display case, marking time for visitors who paused to consider their own dreams and the obstacles that stood in their way. The coordinates engraved on its surface still pointed toward possibilities that most people never dared to imagine, waiting for the next person brave enough to follow them into the sky where dreams become reality and the impossible becomes routine. Jordan's legacy proved that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements come from the most ordinary people who simply refuse to accept that they don't belong among the stars. Her story continued to inspire pilots, dreamers, and anyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough to reach for something greater than themselves. And somewhere in the classified skies above America, Jordan Blake continued to fly missions that pushed the boundaries of what was possible, proving every day that the girl who was once kicked out over a stutter had become exactly what she always knew she could be, one of the greatest pilots who ever lived. The sky, as she had always known, belonged to those who refused to surrender their right to soar. The end. Sometimes the people who soar the highest are those who were once pushed down the lowest. If this story moved you, remember that your own sky is waiting, and the only person who can decide whether you're qualified to fly is you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our everyday life. Stories community, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Have you ever had someone try to crush your dreams because they thought you didn't belong? Share your story in the comments. Your triumph could inspire someone else who's fighting their own battle right now.